Chapter 7.
The Tiger was the tallest and strongest of 10 well-muscled black men racing up and down a weathered asphalt basketball court at Carter Park in Petway. He understood that he wasn't a skillful shooter or dribbler, but he rebounded like a pro and defended the basket fiercely. And he hated to lose more than anything. In his world, you lose, you die. The player he guarded called himself Buckwheat, and the Tiger had heard that the nickname had something to do with an old TV series in America that sometimes made fun of black kids. Buckwheat either didn't mind the name, or he'd gotten used to it. He was fast on the basketball court, and a steady shooter. He was also a trash talker, as were most of the young players in D.C. The Tiger had picked up the game in London instantly while he was at university. But there wasn't much trash talking in England. "You talk a good game, but you're going to lose," the Tiger finally said, as he and his opponent ran up the court, shoulder to shoulder. Buckwheat turned off a screen and took a bounce pass in the left corner. He proceeded to bury a long, perfectly arced jump shot, even though the Tiger bumped him hard after the release. "Fucking ape!" the other man yelled, as the two of them ran back the other way. "You think so? Oh, hell, I know so. Another minute, you be the big monkey watching on the sideline." The Tiger laughed, but said nothing more. He scored on a rebound, and then Buckwheat's team raced the ball up the court on a fast break. Buckwheat caught a pass in full stride and brought it hard to the hoop. He had a step on the Tiger and called out, "Game!" even before he went up for the winning dunk. He was airborne, graceful, and athletic. When the Tiger hit him with all his force and weight, he took the 6'3" man down, drove him into the metal pole supporting the basket. The man lay sprawled on the asphalt, with blood streaming from his face. "Game!" shouted the Tiger, and raised both arms high over his head. He loved to play basketball. What great fun it was to beat these loud-mouthed African Americans who didn't know anything about the real world. On the sidelines, his boys cheered as if he were Michael Jordan and Kobe Bryant rolled into one. He wasn't any of that, he knew. He didn't want to be like Mike or Kobe. He was much better. He decided life and death on a daily basis. He walked off the court, and a man came up to him. This particular man couldn't have been more out of place, since he wore a gray suit, and he was white. "Gady Ahmed," said the white devil. "You know who he is?" The Tiger nodded. "I know who he used to be." "Make an example of him." "And his family." "Of course," said the white devil. "His family, too."
Chapter 8. I put in a call for help to my friend Avi Glazer, who headed up the gang intervention project in the 3rd District. I told Avi why it was important to me. "Course I'll help. You know me, Alex. I'm more tapped into Lamara R., Batos Locos, Northwest gangs, but you can come over here and ask around 17th and R if you want. See if anybody's tuned in. Any way you could meet us?" I asked him. "I'll owe you one. Buy you a beer." "Which makes it how many total? Favors and beers?" This was his way of saying yes, though. Bree and I met Avi at a shitty little pool hall called 44. The owner told us that was how old he was when he opened the place. Avi already knew the story, but listened politely anyway. "Seemed like as good a name as any," the owner said. His whatever attitude struck me as that of a long-term stoner. For sure he wasn't making his nut on billiards and sodas. His name was Jaime Ramirez, and Avi Glazer had advised me to give him room and a little respect. "You know anything about the murders in Georgetown last night?" I asked Ramirez, after we'd chit-chatted some. "Multiple perps?" "That was some awful shit," he said, leaning on the bottom half of a Dutch door, a brown cigarette held between stubby fingers and tilted at the same angle as his body. He chinned up at the television in the corner. "Channel 4's all I get in here, Detective." "How about any new games opening up?" Bree asked. "Players we might not have heard about?" Somebody who would wipe a family out. Hard to keep up, Ramirez said and shrugged. That's when Glazer gave him a look. But yeah, matter of fact, there has been some talk. His dark eyes flicked almost involuntarily past me and Bree. Africans, he said to Avi. African-American? I asked. Or African-African? He turned back to Avi. Yo, Toto, I'm gonna get something for this? Or this a freebie? Avi Glazer looked at me first, and then at Ramirez. Let's say I owe you one. What kind of African? I asked. He shrugged and blew out air. How am I supposed to know that? Black guys from Africa kind of African. English speaking? Yeah, he said, nodding. But I never spoke to them. Sounds like they're into a little bit of everything. You know, 4-H club, hits, hoes, heroin, and heists. This ain't your graffiti and skip party kind of gang. He opened a glass-fronted cooler and took out a can of Coke. Anyone thirsty? $2. I'll take one, Glazer said. He cupped a couple of bills into Ramirez's hand, and they didn't look like singles. Then Glazer turned to me. And I will collect from you, too. Count on it. Africans, Ramirez repeated as we headed toward the door. From Africa. Chapter 9. This was the last place I wanted to be in D.C., or probably any place else. So unbelievably sad and eerie and tragic. So many memories rising to the surface for me. Ellie's office was up on the second floor of the house in Georgetown. It was as tidy and meticulously organized as I remembered her being back when we thought we might love each other. A copy of Sidney Poitier's The Measure of a Man was open on the arm of an easy chair. I'd liked the autobiography and remembered that Ellie and I had similar tastes in books, music, and politics. The shades were all drawn to exactly the same height. The desk held an iMac, a phone, an appointment book, and a few family photos in silver frames. The room felt strange compared with the downstairs of the house, which had been ransacked by the killers last night. I started with Ellie's appointment book, and then went on to the desk drawers. I wasn't sure yet what I was looking for, only that I'd had to come back here with a clearer head than I'd had last night. I booted up Ellie's computer and went into her email, checking the inbox, sent items, and deleted folders, working backward in time. I was trying to get as close as possible to the moment of the murders. Had Ellie known the killers? The first thing to catch my attention was a note from an editor at Georgetown University Press. It concerned her completion schedule for the new book. Ellie had a new book coming out? I knew she was on the history faculty at Georgetown, but I didn't know much more than that. We had seen each other at a few charity events during the past 15 years or so, but that was about it. She was married. I wasn't for much of that time, and that fact can sometimes cut down contact and communication. I ran her name through Amazon and Barnes & Noble and found 3 book titles. Each had something to do with African sociopolitics. The most recent one, Critical Juncture, had been published 4 years ago. So where was the new book? Was there a partial manuscript I could read? I swiveled around to look over the floor-to-ceiling bookcases that took up 2 entire walls of the office. Ellie had hundreds of volumes here, mixed in with a collection of awards and citations. Kids' artwork and framed photos covered the rest of the space. Then all of a sudden, I was looking at a picture of myself. Chapter 10. It was an old snapshot from our college days. I remembered the time as soon as I saw it. Ellie and I were sitting on a blanket on the National Mall. We had just finished finals. I had a summer internship lined up at Sibley Memorial, and I was falling in love for the first time. Ellie told me that she was, too. In the photograph, we were smiling and hugging one another, and it looked as if we could be that way forever. Now, here I was in her house, responsible for Ellie in a way I never could have imagined. I let myself stare nostalgically at the picture for a few more seconds, then forced myself to move on, to come back to the present mess. It didn't take long to find 300 typed pages of a manuscript titled Death Trip. The subtitle on the title page read, Crime as a Way of Life, of Doing Business, in Central Africa. A copy of a plane ticket had been inserted in the manuscript. The ticket was round-trip from Washington to Lagos, Nigeria. Ellie had returned from there 2 weeks ago. I looked through the index at the back of the manuscript and found a listing for Violence, African Style, and a subhead, Family Massacre. I turned to the relevant manuscript page and read, There are gang leaders for hire all through Nigeria and especially in Sudan. These brutal men and their groups, often made up of boys as young as 10, have an unlimited appetite for violence and sadism. A favorite target is entire families, since that spreads both news and fear the farthest. Families are massacred in their huts and shacks, and even boiled in oil, a trademark of a few of the worst gang leaders. I decided to take the partial manuscript with me to get it copied. I wanted to read everything that Ellie had written. Was this what had gotten her killed? Her book? Next, I stared for a long time at a striking, poignant picture of Ellie, her husband, and their 3 beautiful children. All dead now, murdered right here in their home. At least they hadn't been boiled in oil. I took one more look at the photo of the 2 of us on the National Mall, young and in love, or whatever it was that we were feeling. Ellie, I'll do what I can for you and your family. I promise you that. I left the house thinking, what did you find in Africa? Did somebody follow you back? Chapter 11.
Everybody there knew there was trouble, but no one knew what kind or how bad it was. A dark green panel van had screeched to a stop in front of a low-level mosque in Washington called Masjid al-Shura. More than 150 peaceful congregants were crowding the sidewalk in front. Even so, the very moment Gedi Ahmed saw the gunmen scrambling out of the van, saw their gray hoodies, their black face masks and jaunty sunglasses, he knew they had come for him. They were just boys. The Tiger's boys. The first gunshots were aimed into the sky. Just warnings. Men and women screamed, and some scurried back into the mosque. Others flattened themselves on the sidewalk, shielding their children's bodies as best they could. His hands held high, Gedi Ahmed made his decision and moved away from his family. Better to die alone than to take them with me, he was thinking, shaking like a leaf now. He hadn't gotten far when he heard his wife, Aziza, scream, and he realized what a terrible mistake he'd made. Gedi! Gedi! He turned as the wild boys carried, then threw Aziza into the waiting van. And then, his children. They were taking the children too. All 4 of them were hustled into the van. Gedi reversed direction quickly, and now he was screaming, more loudly than anyone in the crowd, even more than Aziza. A courageous man from the congregation took a swing at one of the kidnappers. The boy yelled, "Dog!" and shot the man in the face. Then he fired again, where the man lay spread-eagled and already dying on the sidewalk. Another bullet took down an elderly woman just as Gedi pushed past her. The next shot found his leg, and running became falling. Then 2 of the boys snatched him up off the ground and threw him into the van with his family. "The children! Not our children!" sobbed Aziza. "Where are you taking us?" Gedi screamed at the kidnappers. "Where?" "To Allah," came the answer from the driver, the Tiger himself.
Chapter 12. The mystery was deepening and getting worse each day, but much of Washington didn't seem to care, probably because this one happened in Southeast, and only black people were killed. Lorton Landfill is the final destination for much of Washington's garbage. It is 250 acres of foul and disgusting refuse. so we were fortunate the bodies had been